Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, non-binary, distinguished guests, welcome to Ridiculous, the Life of a Clown. So we can just go ahead and get started. So, first start off with who you are and what do you do?
My name is Snatch Adams. I am a clown, a burlesque performer. I do all kinds of unicycling and other circus stuff. And that's what I do these days.
So you went to the Clown Conservatory, just like I did, and that's where I first met you. But you got your start when you were much, much younger, like 10 or 12, right?
Yeah. So when I was 10, I was going to this summer camp, Camp Ingersoll, that was like running, jumping, swimming, hiking, all kinds of active stuff. And I got bitten really bad by this dog, this mix of Rottweiler, German Shepherd, and Doberman named Benny. He was huge. He bit like a huge hole in my leg. And I couldn't go to my regular summer camp. And my parents said, oh, we'll just put her in the circus camp. I don't know how they thought it'd be less physical because I spent that summer learning how to ride a unicycle with my leg all bandaged up and open wound there. But I fell in love with the unicycle. Oh my God, I was obsessed. I was doing it every day. I was borrowing unicycles from camp and taking them home and working on it all day long. And by the time I was 12, I was riding a 5-foot unicycle while wearing 2-foot stilts. I somehow convinced them to build me a special unicycle called a Stiltocycle that had like tin cans on the pedals which were down at the wheel. And so I was doing that in the circus. And that year or the next year, when I was 13, they started a youth traveling circus and asked me to be part of it. And which was bittersweet for me because it meant I couldn't do a lot of after school activities like basketball in middle school. But circus was super important to me, and I'm so glad I did it. I did that for, I think, 4 years, and then I joined like the adult version of that in town and did that for a year. That was like an environmental theme circus for a Fragile Planet. And then that took me to when I was 18. And then I decided that I didn't want to go to college, and I took a year to do AmeriCorps, and I taught circus skills to kids in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I started a circus camp in the summer that's still going today. There was like 30 kids. It was 3 weeks when I started it. I worked with kids with autism, taught them art and circus stuff. I did a theater troupe for adults with developmental disabilities. I taught an art class for adults with mental illnesses, and I worked at schools and community centers in the area, mostly for low-income kids. And after that, I was like, well, okay, what should I do now? I want like a direction to go in, and I found out about the Clown College in San Francisco.
The Clown Conservatory?
Yes, the Clown Conservatory, where I had actually gone a few years before for the ICO, American Youth Circus Organization. When I was in my traveling circus, I went there for their festival in San Francisco, and I absolutely fell in love with San Francisco. And then later went to that clown college, which was amazing. And yeah, here I am.
Okay, so where did this all take place? Where were you when you were going to the circus camp?
In Connecticut.
In Connecticut.
Yeah, Middletown, Connecticut.
So circus camp brought you to the Clown Conservatory. What happened after that?
So after that, I had a post-clown college slump where I had no idea what I was doing. I was living in Oakland, and I didn't really know what to do about getting work, what I wanted to do. I didn't have I had an act that I developed in college, but I didn't really know where to go with it.
What was the act?
I was a character named Yolga, who was like a unicycle ballet dancer and instructor who had kind of a general Eastern European accent and was very mean. And yeah, so that act was great. I had 2 acts, actually. One was a volunteer act and one was like a unicycle dance that I did. But yeah, I just had no idea where to go with those things. So I found myself just kind of not performing for years. And then when I was at a friend's house, my friend Il Nocturnal, who's a burlesque performer in Oakland, and there was a burlesque show at her party. And I was like, oh my God, this is so fun. I want to do this. And she said, oh, great. Put together an act. I'll put you in my show. So I made a knife juggling burlesque act. and it got seen at this show called Debauchery in Oakland at the White Horse. And from there, just more shows kept coming my way. I made more acts, and it kind of blew up from there. When people found out I had circus skills, they asked me to do all these other things. And then I started doing walk-around gigs for stilting and unicycling, that kind of stuff. Then I started making straight circus acts. I just last night debuted my tall unicycle street show style show. So now I do kind of everything, and I'm back in it.
So it's really weird that burlesque brought you back to circus.
It did.
My performance oeuvre kind of devolved down into just one single burlesque act, and that's pretty much all I do anymore is just this one burlesque, and it kills. It's amazing and it kills, but if you only have the one act, you can't do it that often. You know?
Yeah,
you can't be in every show, so I get to do it like once every year or so.
Yeah.
That I can do my act, and it is. I will happily say that it is amazing, but it is the only amazing act that I have, and it's the only act that I have. So you've been doing burlesque for a number of years now, yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's talk. You kind of have a signature act, which is your giant balloon. So
I guess so. I mean, I like to think that all my acts are my signature acts, but yeah, the giant balloon has gotten a lot of attention these days, which is great. It's a cool, weird thing that not very many performers do.
So how did you come into that? How did you develop it?
So in last February, I went to the Patch Adams Clowntown Healing Fest in Phoenix, and I saw my friend Chicle, who's a performer from Puerto Rico, doing the giant balloon. And I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. And I asked him about where he got them, and he gave me a lot of advice, and I just started doing it.
Okay. So Patch Adams, which again, obviously, where you take your name from, did you get a chance to study under him for a while?
I didn't study under him. I'm friends with his son Lars, who's also an amazing clown. And one day Patch was coming into town to visit, and Lars said, oh, we should hang out. So I met Patch, and of course hung out with him at this festival, and I performed for him as Snatch Adams, which was great. I did my long snatch routine for him. And but I've never taken any classes with him or that kind of thing.
So talk to me, while you've taken classes with him, you've kind of done, not medical clowning, you've done the kind of clowning they do in Clowns Without Borders with Emergency Circus, right? Yeah. So how did you get involved with them, and what is it that you guys did?
So I met Clay at the Superhero Street Fair last year.
That's Clay Amazing?
Yeah, Clay Amazing. And yeah, we got along great and decided to go on some of these tours together. So we did a bunch of tours. We've been through Mexico and the southwestern United States, Pacific Northwest, homeless shelters in the streets of Mexico, foster care centers, kind of all over the place. And it's been great. It's made me really grow as a performer. Actually, I've performed in all different kinds of situations. Just had to kind of run with it for kids who don't speak my language, or, Haitian refugees who are stuck in Tijuana who have literally nothing, and then suddenly this weird circus ambulance shows up and does giant balloon for them. So it's been great. Yeah.
So I'm thinking for a second.
Sure.
So the differentiation between clown and burlesque, where does that lie for you? Do you see a specific difference there and a separation in the two art forms?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of clowns try specifically to shy away from kind of blue humor as well, and maybe aren't the biggest fan of mixing the two. But I've found great success and great joy in burlesquing burlesque. It's such a specific thing where, I do this mime routine that I kind of mime an entire striptease. And at one point, my invisible dress gets stuck on my head.
So weird. Kelly Hawley, who's a clown, who is a couple years before you, does a burlesque act, but in her burlesque act, her dress gets stuck.
Yeah, her real dress. Yeah, mine's like a fake dress. But there's a moment where I unzip the dress all the way down to my feet, and then I mime going down and reaching to the bottom of the dress to pull it over my head. And after I debuted the act, one of my friends, Honey Bunny, came backstage, and she was like, oh my God, when you were pulling that dress up, I was like, no one would ever do that because it's gonna get oh my God, it got stuck. And all the performers like related so heavily to all the movements that I was doing in burlesque, and each of them could relate to like, oh, this happened that sucked, and this happened that I had to deal with, and they were like, oh, this is so great. Like, they enjoyed it, and the audience enjoyed it for different reasons, which was so great for me. It's such like a niche thing to kind of clown the burlesque world, that I'm finding like that's really easy for me to do and fun and really connects with people. And it's so like, you know, there's it's so different than classic burlesque, which is so beautiful and not necessarily very funny because it's its own thing. And so to have someone go up there who, especially this act where I my long snatch act where I get introduced is like, oh, it's going to be a super classic act, and then it turns out that it's a whole clown thing, and at first people are like being very polite as I am doing a very bad classic burlesque act on this stage. It's so unexpected and just brings people to a different place, that I think is appreciated in a world of classic burlesque.
So the burlesque community is really supportive and encouraging and inclusive for the most part, by and large. Have you gotten much pushback from the clown community on being so focused as a burlesque dancer, being so inherently sexual in what you're doing? Because I mean, there's no way to separate burlesque from sexuality, and so many clowns work so avidly to separate any hint of sexuality away from what they're doing. So has there been pushback, and what's it been like?
There's not been pushback. There's been no one telling me not to do it. The response that I've gotten is some advice from some people in the community who are older, and I respect. They have great, you know, long-lasting careers professionally, and they were just like, look, I can't book you as a circus performer with the name Snatch Adams, and I can't book some of this like really dirty stuff. I need you to make acts that are straight circus and don't have any like implied nudity or whatever, any striptease element, and have a different name. And so this was a while ago, and I took that advice to heart because
you wanted to work.
Exactly. I wanted to have as wide a range as I can, which is something great about clown. It's like appeals to all audiences. And so I did that. So now I also go by Robin Lara, which is another stage name. And I do, all kinds of stuff. I'm working on a full kids show now. And I have, a balloon act that's for kids and my tall unicycle act that for kids. Yeah.
That's great. So you don't have a day job. You just perform for a living.
So I actually, I don't know if you can consider this a day job, but when I quit the community center job that I was working on, it was so that I had more time to perform.
And where was that?
That was at the Jewish Community Center in Berkeley.
Okay.
And one of my friends, Mojo DeVille, who's another wonderful burlesque performer in the community, was working at the Go Game, and she said, oh, they're hiring game runners. You'd be great for this job. I had no idea what it was, but I looked into the position and I was like, oh my God, this sounds so fun. So I got the job, and it's kind of whenever I want it to be and whenever they want to have me work there. So in that sense, it's not a day job. It's sort of another gig, but it does provide me with a lot of security that makes it so that I'm able to do what I do.
Yeah, I forgot that I knew that. I am so deeply, because I've gone out for that job a couple of times, and so if you get the full-time version, it just pays so well, and it's doing game production, which is a big part of what the other part of my life is about. Mm-hmm. So yeah, deeply, deeply jealous. Okay, so clown. What are some of the pros and cons of working in this art form for you so far?
Pros and cons. The pro is that it is so fun and fulfilling. I love the interaction with other humans, and I love being able to do things and being expected to do things that you're like not supposed to do. It's just so fun to be at a gig and you're the one who's just supposed to do kind of whatever you want that makes a situation fun and interesting for people. It's so freeing and fun, and freeing for everyone involved, and getting other people to come along and do stuff with you. I mean, I have this toilet paper gun that I do sometimes at walk around gigs, and just getting adults and children to play in toilet paper, or like using my leaf blower to blow air in their face and make their mouth all big is just, it's great. And I love watching people loosen up when they interact with clowns.
So what are the cons? What are the drawbacks?
The cons, I would say sometimes it's stressful, just not knowing if I'll have enough gigs next month, that kind of thing. And often people have sometimes different expectations of what you're going to do than what is like the reality. So sometimes it can be hard to kind of manage those and make sure you're like getting a clear agreement with someone where you're going to do a performance.
So, sorry, I totally had another question and I blanked on it while
okay.
I was thinking about what you were saying. What is the inherent function of a clown? What makes clown as opposed to something else? What is the dogma that you use to build the work that you do?
I mean, I think there can be a million answers to this question, which is probably why you asked. I know. So I'm going to pick one aspect that's popping to my head right now, which is just that I try to be as relatable as possible and kind of make fun of things that happen to everyone that we can all be like, oh my God, that does happen. That's so funny. Like when I am doing a striptease and I can't get my pants off because they're too tight. Like everyone can relate to having pants that are too tight. And when they see that and you make eye contact, people are in the room with you and you can see them, you can touch them, you can talk to them. They can change your act by saying something. I think that's great. It's like you're having a shared experience with those people as well, which I find really different from a lot of other types of performance. I love that it's so interactive. And yeah, I think it just can like make sure that we're talking about sometimes even taboo things or things that other people aren't supposed to say or do, and the clown does it and we all love that. I just think that's great.
Okay, so when you're building your work,
yeah,
so I'm thinking more towards, well, let's include burlesque as well as clown, especially if we're looking at you as a clown that does burlesque, not a burlesque dancer who has clown elements in their work. Do you understand what I mean by the separation?
That's
there?
Also how I would describe myself. Yes. Okay,
so you're a clown, and part of the way that you express that art form is through burlesque. How do you? What is the framework of knowing that something is going to be good before you've taken it up in front of an audience? How do you know what is quality work before you've gotten the feedback, from the people who you're presenting it for?
That's such a hard question to answer because it's so intuitive, I would say. Just something that makes me laugh. And then just the way that the structure comes together. Like I have, an act where all my clothes are too long. And then I just put the costume on and I go in my studio, lock myself in there, and I just pull it off in all different ways and see what happens, and then something pops into my head like, oh, what if I had things hidden in here? Like that would be surprising. Things that are surprising, things that are incongruous. There's all kinds of different reasons things are funny. So I don't really know how I know. And often I just then ask people or have friends over and show them, see what they think, and then do it for an audience and keep the things that play well.
So, of all the things that you've done as a performer, what is it that you're most proud of?
Oh my gosh. That's a deep question.
Or a thing that you are particularly proud of. Doesn't have to be the most. It's often hard to find the pinnacle, and I try and avoid asking those kinds of questions, but a thing that you are particularly proud of.
I think that something recently that I was very proud of. Actually, I am super proud of myself for what I did last night, where I decided that I wanted to have a unicycle street show, and I wrote a script and I gave myself a deadline of this work in progress night that I had, and then
Amelia Van Brunt's work in progress?
Yeah. Before that, I had one at Bree Crabtree's house, the Vulcan, she set up, And that got me to write the script, and then the next one got me to memorize it, and then I did it last night, and it was great. It went over really well, and it's the first time I've spoken on stage for years, since clown college.
Really? So all this time, I mean, again, many burlesque performers speak, and I think most theatrical clowns at this point speak. So you've been performing silently for years. Yeah.
I got a little stuck in just the format of burlesque and just doing a silent act to music, and it got really comfortable for me.
My burlesque is so the opposite. Like, I come out, immediately just start taking off my clothes with no music, while doing a monologue to a specific person in the audience that I will be going back and forth from, and it is over the top sexual. It's all about BDSM, and consent culture, and we're just having a conversation between me and a specific person in the audience, and that's 2/3 of the act, is just until I'm wearing nothing but socks and some Kleenex, and then the music starts and I do my little dance, and then I'm done. And there's the big punchline blow off. But it didn't cross my mind that burlesque performers don't talk.
Yeah, they often don't.
Well, definitely if you look back at the older, like, classic vintage 60s films of burlesque dancers, there's no... But, I mean, if we look at the term burlesque itself, I mean, it doesn't mean, to get up there and do a comedical, non-nude striptease. It means to parody or satire. Yeah. And there were more like a stand-up, but, there would be a... what are they called? It's a French word. It means that you're the host. You're the anyway. It's a French word, and it sounds real fancy, and it means you're the host. And there's usually a comedian back then who would be constantly doing bits between the pieces. So that didn't dawn on me. So what was that feeling like, going back into speaking?
Well, it was actually easier than I thought, because I've been doing work with the Go Game for the past 2 years,
which is super verbal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hosting events all the time with them, and I'm the MC. I make up jokes on the fly. That's like my entire job. So that was like a lot of good preparation for doing this. And once I actually had the script memorized, then I was fine on stage. So it was great, and I'm so happy that I'm back to doing it. Eventually I want to get into hosting and all kinds of stuff.
Hosting?
Yeah, hosting events, shows, yeah.
Yeah, MC I rarely clown, but MC is the thing that I do most. MC or ringmaster. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the media that have influenced who you became as a clown? I'm talking about like film, television, music, and so on. It can even be other clowns, but what is the media that had the most impact on the clown that you became?
I was thinking about this recently, actually, because I watched the new Christopher Guest movie, Mascots, and I was like, oh my god, I just love all of the Christopher Guest movies so much. All of those weird characters who are like normal people but really weird is a huge influence on me. Because a lot of what I do is like my kind of standard character in the burlesque work that I do is really just me, but in a really weird light, in an interesting situation. And I like that about those movies. That's been a huge influence for me, I would say.
Yeah, you're talking about it being just you. One of the things that we've talked about with a number of people is coming out of the clown conservatory, like you and I both did. Jeff's focus was structure before character, whereas the traditional method of learning clown, if you're going the Lecoq route, is character and then structure. And so for a lot of people that I've talked to, character is something they're only getting into later in their career after having come through this specific dogma. And for me, I found that there are maybe 2 characters that I do. And again, this probably goes without saying, but they're just, heightened aspects of who you are. But you see a lot of people who don't come from our background, who don't come from our specific dogma, whose character often seems to be entirely an affectation. Where they've picked a thing, and that is the thing, and it doesn't really seem to come from a core of who they are. Mm-hmm. Back to media. What's something, it can be clown, it can be theater, or whatever, that you think is underrated and wish that more people had seen or appreciated?
I don't know if I have an answer for that. I'm not a big TV person or movie person, to be honest. So I'm not sure.
Okay. You just sit in the corner and stare at people, and that's how you get your funny. That's okay.
Sit in the corner. No, I love live shows.
Okay, so what kind of stuff are you seeing?
I mean, I go to my friends' shows all the time, and I've been traveling so much. I try to go to shows while I'm traveling. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of amazing local shows in the area that I think everyone should go check out all the time. And there's performers, traveling performers, everyone there.
Ross Travis, who we had on, his episode just went up today, has a new show called Buckle Whale Man.
Yeah,
that looks just amazing.
Yeah, I'm hoping to go.
Yeah. So what is a role or a project that you've always wanted to do but haven't had the chance due to budgets or constraints or logistics?
Project that I've always wanted to do. I feel like I've been doing all the projects that I want to do. I don't know. I mean, eventually I want to have my own full-length show and then tour it around. Actually, no, I do have a good answer for this. I want to buy a car and then set up a tour around the whole country and go to every major city where I would say I have like at least one friend in every major city, and go visit all of them and tour and just have a blast for like 6 months or something.
So what's your time frame on that? When are you going to make that happen?
Good question. Maybe soon. My housemate's car is potentially dying right now, and if it does, then I'm just going to use that excuse to get the car. And then now I have this tall unicycle show. It's about 15 minutes long right now. And then I have all these other acts. So I could go on the road kind of any time.
Do you have a clean version of your balloon act?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I did it with the emergency circus a lot for kids everywhere. Yeah.
So that could happen now. What's 10 years from now? What's happening for you? I mean,
don't make me think about
we all have to worry about it, especially if you're gigging for a living.
Yeah.
It's got to be in the back of your mind. Like, what am I doing in 10 years? What am I doing when I break my leg? What am I doing, either when the future happens or the worst happens? So where are you in 10 years? What's going on? What is your goal or plan?
I would love to be someone who, it's funny, a weird little kind of milestone that I have is like someone who gets flown around to do things. So if that was became a bigger part of my life, that would be amazing. And I want to go to Europe and do the variety shows there and do burlesque there. I hear it's lovely. So those are some goals for me. Just, not worrying about money and being flown around to be me would be great.
I feel that way about conventions.
Yeah.
That's one of my goals is to just get paid to go to conventions.
Yeah.
Because I'm never going to go if I have to be, the one paying to get in the door.
That's
but if someone's paying me, I will totally love to be there and take part. I don't want to be in a crowd of people if I'm not getting paid to be in that crowd of people, no matter how lovely it might be. So, who are your heroes? Who, especially as a performer, who are the people who inspire you the most? Live or dead?
Oh my God, I don't know. I feel like I was trying to think about that after listening to some of these other episodes, and I was like, who are my heroes? I feel like it's so hard to choose just a few. I mean, I feel like I want to just be cliche and say the classics, like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. Those are some of my favorites. But I want to have a better answer than that, and I don't.
Well, you can't. It's kind of difficult to go wrong with being inspired by those people.
It's true, I know, but it's a bit of a cop-out answer potentially.
So, you've been gigging since you were 13. That you've been performing, performing somewhat professionally at least somewhat professionally since you were a child, since you were an adolescent. You've already said what the first gig you did was. What's the weirdest gig you've done?
The weirdest gig. How about my favorite gig?
Okay,
and while I'm saying the story, I'll think about my weirdest gig. One of my favorite gigs is actually something that I did in clown college, which was a benefit show that was a fashion show that was hosted and put on by drag queens, potentially some of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And the fashion show was a benefit for people who had disabilities. It seemed like a mix of physical and mental disabilities. And the people with the disabilities were modeling the clothes, and the drag queens were hosting. And it was and I was on stilts dancing around, and there were some other performers there. And it was such an amazing mix of energy and people from like very different walks of life that it felt really beautiful to be there in that moment, and also to see the empowerment of people who were like in wheelchairs modeling these clothes, and everyone loved it, and it was amazing. And then it would be immediately followed by like someone doing a drag performance and lip syncing to, you know, some amazing song. And that was maybe my favorite gig, I guess.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about working with adults with cognitive disabilities and children on the spectrum. That's two of my favorite things. I love working with children on the spectrum, and I love working with adults with cognitive disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two things that really, really grab my heart. I spent last year in the San Francisco school system working with kids on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And adults with cognitive disabilities is, you know, the big part of my childhood. So it means a lot to me. And doing the tour in clown school, which I believe you guys did as well.
Yeah.
One of the best shows that we got to do was for the group home for the adults with cognitive disabilities, which was just amazing. I'm assuming you guys did that one as well. Yeah.
I know we did one at the School for the Deaf, and we did one at a senior citizens facility. We probably did that one too. I can't quite remember that one.
So how do you go about creating new work? What is your framework that you set for yourself for creating a new piece?
Oh my gosh, that is a great question. I love that question. It used to be that I would pick a prop. So I picked my unicycle, and then I went from there, and I thought about what song I wanted to use and who I wanted to be. And the costume was really helpful in deciding who that character was. Then sometimes I'm just inspired by a song that I've heard, or for my mop balancing act, I'm like a custodian character, and I guess I picked the mop balancing, but then I thought, okay, well, I want to be a custodian, and I picked She Works Hard for the Money as my song by Donna Summer, and it just went from there. Then my mime burlesque act, I woke up and had this idea for it, and within half an hour I had like just my brain was like infused with all of this inspiration, and I went home. I was in Tucson, Arizona for Christmas, and I flew home a few days later, and that week I performed it. I just like made it in a day and performed it, and that was like the fastest anything's ever happened for me. So yeah, it used to be that I would just like lock myself in my studio on a weekend night until like 3 a.m. with like some whiskey and put my phone and computer like away from the room and just like force myself to see what happened.
It's good discipline.
Yeah, I guess so.
For me, it's I don't know if it's a product of you know, my mental health issues, but almost everything I created as a performer came as epiphany. Just I'm walking down the street and an image comes fully formed into my mind, and like the board games I design, like everything else I do, it's something that I want to see, but no one else is doing it. And often I will spend time hoping someone else has done it, so I don't have to. But you know, almost everything I create is a product of I wanted it to exist, and no one else had gotten around to it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like this podcast, and so that's why I did it. But for me, it comes from epiphany. I don't have that level of discipline. I hate rehearsal so much. Hate it with a passion.
That's where I find just locking myself in my studio with a prop or with a costume, then I just play around with it and see what happens.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about just about everything I had on here. So if you were to tag, was there anything in particular that you would like to talk about? Anything that's in your craw, just kind of eating at you that you want to get out there?
No, I don't know.
All right. Who are 3 people that you would tag to do this podcast after you?
I would say who would I tag? Maybe my friend Bree Crabtree.
She's excellent.
Maybe Wendy Winaz. Do you know her?
I do. I think I've already reached out to Wendy about doing it.
Okay, cool. Who else hasn't done it that should do it? Slater Penny.
Slater Penny. He's scheduled for when he comes back from his trip.
Great.
To come and do it. Yeah. Okay. Well, Snatch, thank you very much for coming and joining us, and it was great.
Thanks, Abraham.
Thank you for joining us today on Ridiculous Life of a Clown. This program, as always, is made possible by your support through our Patreon, which you can find through www.picklewater.com. Also, please join us this coming January 27th, 2018 at 7 p.m. at Stageworks Theater in San Francisco for a huge circus gala featuring clowns, comedians, and burlesque dancers, all in benefit of Planned Parenthood. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.